Hi everyone. This will be the first in a series of tutorials that will take you through the Encased Volumes exercise for the 3+ Summer Studio. In this first part, we will go through the design elements and basically develop the 3D model of your rooms. And then in the ensuing exercises, we will develop the drawings from those models that you will need to continue developing your project. So we're going to make sure a few things are set before we start drawing. Firstly, we want to have on our ortho snap, so we are drawing things orthogonally to the construction plane as well as the X and Y axis. This will keep everything square. You might choose to go in and set up either by typing in options as the command or clicking on the yellow gear wheel and opening up your Rhino options and setting your grid to snap to 1 foot intervals. Or 6-inch intervals. This might be helpful for you in terms of some of the dimensions that are needed for some of the minimum dimensions that are needed for the project. So basically everything will be in increments of 1 foot with the exception of the stairs, which will be in 6-inch height intervals. Otherwise, I'm just going to keep on my ortho snaps. I've got on my O snaps, so remember that there are some basic snaps you should have on: end, mid, perpendicular. You can have on point, center. The less you have on, the less confusing it might be depending on what you're working on. So it's always good to customize the snaps to the project that you're working on. So I'm going to maximize the perspective viewport. I find it easier to work in there. And I'm going to turn my viewport to ghosted so that I can see both the outlines and the planes of my volumes. The next thing I'm going to want to do is set up my layers, because I remember that layer management is really important, and it will be the way of defining all of the different elements for the project. So we've got rooms, we've got, and remember, just double click on the layer name to be able to change the name. Connectors, we've got enclosure, and I'm just going off of the handout in terms of what the names are going to be. Base, got my Boolean difference, and I don't need an extra layer at this point, but I'm going to go ahead and set it up as a section layer, and that'll come in handy later on. So I'm going to activate my rooms layer, and remember, you're check marking it, not just highlighting it. If I highlight it and don't check it, it is not the active layer. So I want to make sure that I'm drawing on the rooms layer. And then I'm going to open up the planes command, or the surfaces dialog box. So I'm just pressing and holding on the kind of 4 corner points plane or surface. And I'm going to drag this out from here so I can keep open this surface creation dialog box, mostly because I just want to be able to have the rectangular plane option open again and again. And that's the easiest way to do it, rather than having to go back in underneath this command every time. You can also learn what the shortcut for it is. The kind of script for it is plane, but you want to then be able to make it a corner-to-corner plane. So anyway, just click on this, and I'm going to click a point to start, and then I can type in the dimensions. So I'm going to type in the 3 small rooms dimensions. So it's 12 feet by 12 feet. Oops, I must have done something wrong here. Let's see. Redo, click, 12 feet, 12 feet. There we go. I'm going to make my second plane here. It is 18 feet by 12 feet. The next one is 24 feet by 12 feet. And then I'm going to click to my enclosure layer, and I'm going to go ahead and draw that. And I'm just drawing the base dimensions at this point. We will go through how to extrude these up into volumes shortly. So I'm going to draw my base plane, and I'm going to draw it over top of these guys. The dimensions of that are 40 feet by 27 feet. And that should allow for you to encompass some of the different volumes. The next thing I'm going to want to do is start thinking about the composition of these elements. So I'm going to go into the top view, maximize that. I'm going to get rid of my surface box. I'm just going to hit X and it'll disappear until I need it again and I can go grab it. And I'm going to turn this into ghosted as well so that I can see both layers on top of each other. And even if I haven't been modeling particularly cleanly so far, I haven't been typing in dimensions, I'm going to go ahead and get started on that now so that I can have a really clean model. So I'm going to move this enclosure box to have its bottom left corner point be at 0, 0. So move, type in M and hit enter. I'm going to click on the bottom corner point, so it's asking me what I want to move. So I want to move this point to the 0, 0 point, and it will snap it over there. And then I can lock this layer, and I'm going to activate the rooms layer. So I'm going to lock this enclosure layer for now so that I don't accidentally move it around. And I want to then move my smaller spaces or my volumes or my rooms relative to the base plane. So I'm going to snap this into the bottom corner. Sorry, my mouse is a little jumpy. So it's going to the end point, and I'm going to get these guys out of the way for now. And then in terms of my design decisions, I will have thoughtfully considered where to put these, or I'll use the computer to kind of think about where the composition of these elements should be. But for now, I'm going to just go ahead and move this guy 12 inches or 1 foot up from the base plane, because I've read in my project handout that all rooms can have one side that's touching the exterior of the room enclosing volume, but then other dimensions must be at least 1 foot away from each other. So I'm going to have this be a 1 foot dimension, and then I'll deal with the kind of adjacencies of them to each other. So maybe the next one I want to place is this longer version, or this longer version of the room, so I'm going to rotate it. And you don't have to rotate them, they can be in any orientation, they can be in any configuration, as long as they're orthogonal to the enclosure. So I'm just going to rotate it 90 degrees, and it snaps to 90 degrees automatically because I have my ortho snap on. And then I'm going to go ahead and move this. Again, I'm going to move it so that the corners align, and then I'll be able to move it from there a particular distance, and I'll be able to know exactly what those distances are. So I'm going to move this guy in 3 feet. And again, this is just me moving the volumes, not really thinking about the design. I'm going to go ahead and place this last one relative to one of the previous volumes, and then I'm going to move it 1 foot away from it, and I should still be 1 foot away from my edge. And maybe this one I want to have the exterior face open to the sky, so I'm going to move it in from the exterior face on this west side, and then I'll be able to open it to the sky eventually. So I'm going to move it in 3 feet. Okay, so now I've got my plan. I've got each of the volumes, or each of the rooms touching an edge, whether it be an outside edge or what will be an edge above. I'm going to go back into the perspective view. Excuse me. The next thing I want to think about is how I'm connecting these guys to each other, and where they are vertically relative to each other. So the overall height of the enclosure is 17 feet, so I can have a 5 foot differential in terms of where they are relative to each other, or I guess a 4 foot differential because they need to be 1 foot off of the base plane per the project handouts. So the first thing I'm going to do is move these guys up vertically. I just selected each of the rooms planes, or I could, without anything selected, right click on the layer name and choose select objects down here, and it'll select everything that's on that layer, assuming that I've been keeping my layer management clean. At this point I can either move, so type in M and hit enter for the shortcut for move, and in one of the side views, if I click as a reference point and type in 12 because my base units are inches, and click again to set the direction, I can move that automatically straight up. Or if I undo that, I can move them vertically in the perspective plane by clicking on toggling on the vertical option in the command line. So now it says vertical equals yes. So in the perspective view, I can click a point and drag up or towards the kind of in the direction of the z-axis, type in 12, and it will let me move them up 12 inches. And you can kind of double check that here in the front and right views because I've set my minor grid lines at every 1 inch and major lines every 12 inches. I can see that that has moved up a foot. After that, the The directions call for a minimum of 2 of the 3 rooms to be located at a different height, with the floor of the lowest volume 1 foot above the bottom surface of the large volume. So I've got everything at least 1 foot up, and now I need to have 2 of the 3 rooms located at different heights. So if I think about the overall dimensions, 17 feet high minus 1 foot at the base and 1 foot at the top actually gives me 3 feet of play if I want to keep the volumes enclosed in the overall. But this one I want to go all the way up to the top, and I know it needs to be 12 feet high. So 12 feet out of 16, so 17 overall height minus 1 foot here, means that I need to move this up 4 feet. So I'm going to move this vertically 48 inches, or 4 foot. Excuse me. I'm going to go ahead and put this one at, let's say we'll put this one at 2 feet above this guy here, so it's already 1 foot up, and now I'm going to move it an additional 2 feet. So move, vertical, click, 24, or 2 feet. Right, so now I can see that these are at different heights. What I need to think about now is how these guys are going to be connected, right? So I can have a series of ramps, or I can have a series of stairs that connect them to each other. The handout gives you parameters for the stairs, which are a minimum of 12 inches wide, and meaning 12 inches deep in terms of the treads, and 6 inches high. And that they likely need to be 4 feet wide, so we'll go ahead and use that as a parameter. So if I wanted to think about a stair connecting these two, I need to think about what the difference in height is, right? So it's 2 feet from here to here, and if I don't know that for sure, I can go in and double check it in one of my side views, right? So here's this guy, here's this. I'm going to adjust my grid so that you can see. So I'm going to set it to 500. You can see beyond the object, but I can see that there's 2 major lines here, so it's 2 feet up. So if I were to kind of sketch this out in the side view in terms of how a stair is going to work, I'm going to use the polyline tool. And I'm not drawing the actual stair, I'm just thinking about how I need to draw it. So from this plane, I can count this as my bottom riser, or my bottom tread, I'm sorry. So treads are the horizontals, and risers are the verticals. So the part that you step on is the tread, that's the part you tread on, and the riser is the height that you rise up in between each of the steps. So I can count my base plane as my bottom tread, and then I'm going to click here and go up 6 inches. So I'm going to drag my mouse up, type in 6 and hit enter. It's going to ask me which direction, so I could go out one way or the other. And then I'm going to click 12 to type in the next tread dimension and click to the left. 6 to go up, 12 to go over, click, 6 to go up, 12 to go over, and 6 to go up. And I accidentally put a little tail on that. You can, I'm going to explode this, deselect this line. So I'm holding down Control and clicking on this line. And then with everything else still selected, I'm going to join it back together. So this will make this back into a polyline, and I'll be able to delete this. So I've kind of sketched out what I need to do in elevation. So I can see here that my bottom plane is going to be the bottom tread, and the top plane is going to be the top tread, and then I need 3 in between. So if I see that in my top view right now, that's just a line that's representing it. I don't really need that line for anything other than to help me visualize what I'm doing. If you can already visualize, or if you know how to kind of design a stair, then you don't need to do this step in between. So I'm going to delete this, and now I'm going to go in between these two. I'm going to think about where I want the stair to be. Do I want it in the center of one of the volumes? Do I want it along an edge? You know, really, where do I want that? I'm going to turn on my enclosures layer. I'm going to activate my enclosures, or connectors layer, pardon me, and that's going to be for all of my stairs, ramps, landings, and so forth. And I'm going to use the surface planes again. So I'm going to grab this guy, put it over here on the side, just because I want to be able to quickly select this rectangular planes option. And I'm going to draw one stair tread. So I know that the treads are always going to be the same for the most part. So I'm going to click a point, type in 12 and 48. So it's going to be 12 inches deep and 48 inches wide, or 1 foot deep and 4 feet wide. Excuse me. And then I'm going to move that into the location that I need it. And I know I need 3 of these, right, from my previous planning exercise. So I'm going to type in copy, and I'm going to copy from this corner point over and over again, so I get 3 planes here. And I'm not going to worry about the gap for the moment, because I'm going to go in and extend one of these eventually so that it will connect to the planes. Actually, I am going to need one, because I can't extend my top plane, so I'm going to need to draw one additional tread in there. It will be planar with the top or bottom surface though. So I've got 4 treads now, even though one of them is going to be in the same plane as one of the rooms. And then I'm going to switch into my perspective view. They will have, depending on where you snap, they will have aligned to one of the planes. So they've aligned to the top here, and so I'm going to need to move these down, and I'm going to move them either in the front view. So I'm going to type in move, click with ortho on, type in 6, and it's going to move all of them down 6 inches. I can deselect the next one, move 6, control click to deselect, select the next one, move it down 6 inches. Right, so in my section view now, I've got the bottom plane, I've got tread 1, tread 2, tread 3, and the top tread is actually just extending out the top room so that they connect. So you can see the stairs now work between these 2 volumes. The next thing I want to do is maybe between these 2 I want to create a ramp. And the parameters say that the ramps need to have a slope of 1 to 12, so 1 foot up for every 12 feet over. I'm going to visualize this again in the front view so that I can think about what that looks like in section. If you know how to calculate the slope offhand, or you want to do that offhand, you're more than welcome to. But I find that an easy way to kind of sketch out the slope is to use the polyline tool again. Click on the end point of the bottom layer and go over 12 inches. And I'm going to click to set the direction. Sorry, 12. And then I'm going to go up 1 inch. Right? So this is basically the angle that I want to be able to create. So I can use that as my template, and then I can draw a diagonal line from one corner point, so from this end point to this end point. And the object snaps will allow for me to override the ortho settings. So if I click to an endpoint, it won't make me keep it orthogonal. So from here, you don't want to take this and stretch it, or take this and turn on the control points and drag one, because you're going to change the slope of the ramp. So let's say we want to keep it at exactly 1 to 12, but we want to scale it so that this connects with our upper plane here. The easiest way to do that is by using the scale 1D command. So I'm going to maximize this front viewport, get this out of the way for now. And the scale 1D is basically kind of a way to stretch it, right? So if I tell it that this diagonal line is my baseline, and then I tell it I want it to keep going in this direction until I tell it to stop, it will let me do that. I can also use the plane over here as a kind of an ending point, and it will allow me to extend it. But let's use the kind of manual control for now and use the scale 1D. So I'm going to select the diagonal line, type in scale 1D, scale in one direction. I'm going to click the first point and then the second point of my line, and now you can see that I'm dragging it out, but I'm dragging it at the correct angle. Sorry. Scale 1D, origin point, reference point, and then I'm going to drag it all the way over here. Sorry, my computer's running a little slowly, so click, endpoint, and I'm going to drag it out until I intersect my plane. You can see that I'm almost all the way at the end of the plane, so it takes a long time to get up 2 feet with a 1 to 12 slope. So let's see what that looks like in our other views. So you can see that our ramp is going to extend over here this far. I might at this point want to do some adjustment to the way that I have organized my project, or organized my spaces. I know that this width of this ramp needs to be 4 feet, and it's not quite fitting here, so you could either reorganize so that the narrower volume is rotated to 90 degrees from where it's showing now, but then you'd have problems with the longer one fitting. These are kind of design decisions that you'll need to take into consideration. For now, what I'm going to do is imagine that I can intersect, well, I can't do that either. I'm going to have to extend this down into the room. So this ramp's going to be a little bit tricky. Let's see. Okay, let's figure out how to do this. So the first thing that we're going to need to do is think about a landing at the top and the bottom. We know we need to have at least a 4-foot landing. So I'm going to box out a 4-foot by 4-foot landing. And I'm going to copy that from the beginning point to the end point. Because even if my line works diagonally between these two things, I'm just looking for the end of my ramp line. Here it is. Even if the diagonal line reaches, I still need to have 4 feet at the beginning and 4 feet at the end for somebody to get on the ramp and somebody to get off the ramp. So I'm going to need to move this back into the to the bottom room, at least enough so that this landing ends up inside this volume, right? So I've got these 3 things selected together. I'm going to use the move command to move this endpoint in line with, my mouse will cooperate here, with the intersection of where it would connect over to this top plane. So let me do that one more time so you can see. So right now these are in plane with each other, the landing and the top room, but I want this line to line up with this line. So I think about where the geometries are, and I want this point to move to the point where these two were intersecting. So if my intersect object snap is not on, I'm going to turn it on now. And then I'm going to use the move command, so M, enter, and I want to pick this endpoint and move it to this intersection point. And now I have enough space at the top of my ramp to be able to get out into the room. And we're basically going to have to carve away this portion of the room. I don't think there are any issues with doing that in the handout, but if there are, I'm sure you will be able to address those on Friday with Dan. And then it becomes a design decision, so you need to think of a different configuration. So right now our ramp is only just a line. The easiest way to turn that into a ramp that has some surface area to it is to extrude that curve. So extrude curve, E-X-T-R-U-D-E-C, hit enter. And it's going to extrude perpendicular to the construction plane in whatever view it is automatically, right? So the construction plane in the perspective view is the XY plane, so it's going to extrude either up or down automatically. That's not the dimension, or not the direction we want the extrusion to take place in. So up here in your command line, you can click on direction, and it will then let you set which direction you want to extrude. So I'm going to use 2 reference points along the landing, so this point and this point, the end points, to tell it which direction I want to extrude, and then I can use that same point as a reference point to create the extrusion. So now I'm going to just, in terms of cleanliness of my model, I'm going to take that curve and delete it, and I have a 1 to 12 ramp intersecting these 2 volumes, and we'll deal with the overlaps shortly. Okay. The next thing we want to do is start to think about well, we've really kind of set the openings between the rooms, but we need to create those planes into volumes. So we know that each of the 3 rooms is 12 feet high, so I'm going to take each of these, extrude surface, EXTRUDES, and this time we want it to extrude perpendicular to the base plane, so we can leave it as the default. We also want it to cap, we want it to cap the top and the bottom, so I'm going to click on solid yes, and it's going to extrude it as a volume. If I have it on solid no, it's going to extrude it as basically a shell. So solid yes. I'm going to type in 12 feet, and because 12 feet is a positive direction, it will extrude 12 feet up. I'm going to put this on my rooms layer, which it should have been on originally, so I'm going to activate that layer. I'm going to run the same operation for the other excuse me, rooms. Extrude surface, and I'm going to move it in the upward direction and type in 12 feet and hit enter. Same thing with this guy, 12 feet, enter. So now I've got all of my planes as rooms. I want to do the same thing for my ramp surfaces here, and I'm going to get rid of this. It was my kind of reference line for my ramp. I think the easiest way to do this would be to join these surfaces together. Well, there's a couple different ways you could do it. You could copy this top landing vertically. We know that the enclosure or the connection elements need to be at least 8 feet tall. So if I start at the upper landing and move this up 8 feet, a copy of it up 8 feet. Sorry, my mouse is not cooperating. I can take this and use the scale 1D command to make this upper surface the entire length of the ramp. So scale 1D, this is the same operation we use to extend our ramp line. I'm going to click the endpoint, the other endpoint, and then I'm going to use my smart tracking to allow me to use the endpoint of the other landing as a reference. And I've got the top and the bottom planes now. I'm just going to turn off my rooms for a minute so that I can see what I'm doing here. And I need to create kind of an enclosure around the rest of this. An easy way to do that is going to be to loft between the edges. So I'm going to type in loft, L-O-F-T, and I'm going to select this curve and this curve, hit enter. Okay. Do the same thing with this side. Hit OK. The sides are going to be slightly more tricky because we have 3 segments on the bottom and 1 segment on the top. So if we were to try to loft, and I tried to pick this and this, it's going to loft just those 2 portions together, right? So I'm not connecting to these others. If I try to loft all of the edges, so I'm going to click all 3 of these, and then I'm going to click the top one and hit enter, it's going to try to connect those in the way that I selected them, so that's not what we want either. So it might be easiest for us to duplicate these edges and join them together so that we have one polyline that we can loft with this top line. So there's a dupe edge command, and that allows for me to take a surface and pull a line off of it, so I can pull an edge off of it. And I'm going to click all of these outside lines. I'm going to do this once and copy it over because this is the same shape on both sides. These are still 3 separate line segments. I can see that over here under Object Type 3 Open Curves. If I type in Join with all 3 of those selected, I now have 1 open curve. So if I loft again, I can click my top curve, and I can click my bottom curve, and I don't want the surface edge, I want the curve, and hit enter, hit OK. And I can take this surface now and copy it because I know it's the same thing on the other side, from endpoint to endpoint, and hit enter. I'm going to select all of these guys. I want them to be a solid, so I'm going to join them together. And it should turn it into one kind of closed poly surface. You can check that over here in the object. I think there's still a series, or there's still a curve here, so that's why I didn't join it into one thing automatically. So that's good, I've got that. I need to connect my stairs, so I'm going to turn on the rooms again so I can see what I'm working with. I know I need some risers. Again, I'm going to make one of those and copy them because it's going to be the same from here to here to here to here, so I can just draw it once rather than drawing it 4 times. So I'm thinking smart about my drawings. For this one, I am going to use the surface from 4 corner points because I can use these existing planes as reference points. So surface from 4 corner points, and I'm going to click in sequence the 4 corner points. And this will allow me to draw a vertical surface. There's a number of different ways I could have done this. I could have extruded the edge of the surface, so let's do that over here. So if I were doing this for myself, I would pick one way and then copy 3 more times, but I'll show you a couple of different ways that you could do it. So extrude, E-X-T-R-U-D-E, curve, and I can pick a surface edge. It doesn't have to be a freestanding curve, so I'm going to click that and hit enter, and then I'm going to use the next tread up as the reference. I could loft these 2 edges together, so I'm going to go from this way so you can see, or actually for now just turn this off so you can see. I can loft this edge with this edge, so loft, hit OK, and then the last one I need to have one that connects down to the bottom plane, so I'm just going to copy from here. So copy from this point to this point. I apologize, my mouse is being very jumpy. So now I've got all of my risers and all of my treads. I need to make this into an enclosure as well. So I'm going to turn off my room, so I'm just dealing with these guys. And I'm going to think about what I want the top enclosure to be. So I'm going to have it be a diagonal again. I'm going to use a line to start with. I'm going to move that line up because I want it to be 8 feet above the nose of the tread, so this outside corner. So I want it to be 8 feet above that. So I'm going to move it from the bottom to the top. The reason I drew it along the bottom first is because I had this as a reference point. If I had drawn it along the top, I would have had to scale 1D it out and use this as a reference point to get the line the right way. Now I can move it vertically 8 feet. I'm going to click this endpoint, go up 8 feet, and I can extrude curve. I'm going to set the direction, right? So direction, I'm going to use one of these stairs as a reference. I want a point here and a point here. You don't have to use an object, you can just snap out to the construction plane. I'm going to get rid of this curve just to make sure it is not in our way. And I'm going to do the same thing I did before with duplicating the edges so that I can turn this series of treads and risers into a polyline that I can loft with this diagonal. So dupe, edge, select this edge, all the way up, hit enter, and while they're still selected I'm going to join them together. So now I have one curve. Loft again, and select the polyline, or the curve, and this surface edge, hit OK. I'm going to undo one thing. So it's getting a little bit confused because there's a portion of line that's vertical, so it doesn't really know how to connect that to the top curve. So I'm going to do something that I did before. So I'm going to take that curve, explode it, so that I can deal with each of the line segments individually, and deselect, hold down Control and click to deselect. Then I'm going to join this guy again. I'm going to try it one more time. Loft from the curve to the surface edge. I'm going to pay attention to my options here. I'm going to make it normal and not straight sections. And I can hit preview and make sure that that looks right. So it should be connecting along the base now, and hit OK. So now I've got something that connects along each of the different treads and risers up to the top, and it's one surface even though it has some seams in it. I'm going to copy that because I know the other side is the same thing. So end to end, enter, Then I'm going to join these guys together. In this case, I don't need to, well, actually I will, sorry. I'm going to go ahead and close off the ends of this. So in the previous version, we used the loft command to make a surface on this face. So I can try that, I can do that again. So LOFT. I can click this top edge and this poly surface edge. Enter, hit OK. Or I could take these two things and join them to each other. So I'm going to take this surface that's not connected and these that are, join. And if I have one or a smaller number of surfaces that are open, trying to get to a point where you can see that it's open. So you can see in here. I'm going to switch it quickly into shaded view so you can see. Right, you can see into it on this side, but not from this side. I can use the cap command. So I'm going to select this, type in cap. And it'll automatically take planar openings and close them off. And it will connect those all together. So now I have a closed poly surface. That's going to be helpful in terms of booleaning these out of our other volumes. Excuse me. So I've got my rooms, I've got my enclosures, and now or my connectors, and now I need to make my enclosure. So I'm going to unlock the enclosure layer, unclick that, and extrude surface. XTRUDE surface. I want it to go vertically, I want to make sure that it's solid, and I want it to be 17 feet tall. So I can double check now and make sure that my one volume that I intended to meet the top is meeting it. Switch back into wireframe view or ghosted view so that I can see everything. Excuse me. I'm going to make a temporary layer that's called Boolean Union. Because what I want to do is connect these volumes to each other and to the rooms. And then I want to use that overall kind of connected mass to Boolean out the volumes from the difference. So I'm going to put a copy of this outside, I'm going to copy in place, and put it on the Boolean difference layer so that I can be working on that layer and not lose my connectors, not lose my enclosures as a Boolean difference active, enclosure off. So I've only got one outside surface on at this point, but I've got another one that I'm not going to mess up. I'm going to do the same thing by selecting all of these interior volumes, so everything other than the enclosure, and copy in place and put them on the Boolean union layer. I'm going to turn off my connectors. So now I have these guys, and the reason I did that was so that, again, I don't destroy the original objects. I want to be able to have these differenced out, but I want to be able to go back in and have those connectors joined together. So these guys should all be intersecting, so Boolean, Boolean union, select all of my surfaces. And I should have one kind of connected. Turn this off for a second. These should be connecting to each other. Saying that the union is failing. Let's see what's going on here. Let's try them one at a time. So I can join those two together. Do the same thing for these two, hopefully. So far, so good. Must be an extra object in there. It doesn't want a union. It's not liking those two together. think it doesn't like the fact that there is a second surface down here that's connected. So what I'm going to do is just delete this guy for now. And for some reason there are two of them. I don't want either of them. I'm going to join these back together as a volume. And then I'm going to select this poly surface and see if the Boolean union works now. Yeah. So it didn't like that there was an overlapping surface in there. So I should be able to take this, join it with here, Boolean union. And the last thing that we've forgotten actually is that we need to have a connection from the top down to the bottom. You can do that in a number of ways. Let's see. I'm going to turn on my connectors again and turn off my enclosure. This is on the wrong layer. I'm going to turn off my Boolean union. I'm going to turn on the rooms, which are already on. Interesting. Okay. So I've got my union. My connectors are still there, my ramp and my stair. I've lost my rooms for some reason. Only got one of them left. That must have been the problem that we were having. They must have both been on and trying to union on top of each other. So I'm just going to quickly use these as a reference and redraw them using the box command. So endpoint, sorry about that, endpoint and base, endpoint, endpoint, base. And then I'm going to put this poly surface on the room's layer. I'm going to do the same thing over here. Endpoint, endpoint, and endpoint. So I can turn off the Boolean union now. I've got my rooms. I basically need to take this stair and copy it. I'm going to copy it from here over to a point over here. And I need two of these because my rooms are, this room is twice as high off of the other. So I'm going to copy it down to the lower point. I apologize, this is frustrating for me as well with the jumpiness of the mouse. So I want to look at this and make sure these two things are aligned, which they're not quite. I think it snapped to a midpoint. So I want this last tread to be not at the midpoint but at the base point of this stair. So basically I've made my stair twice as long by copying it. And I should be able to turn on my rooms and see where that final volume needs to connect. And of course our stairs are going in the wrong direction. We need them to rotate 90 degrees. So I'm going to select these guys, Boolean, union them together, which it doesn't want to do because of my vertical plane, and rotate them. .90 and move them so that they are connected at the end point here. So now they should be starting at the same height as the previous volume and connecting down into the base of the other. I can double check that in the side view, one of the side views. So I can double check over here that my last riser, which is over here, see where I can get a good view of it. My last riser, which is the bottom here, is connecting to the bottom plane, and I can eyeball the fact that I've got at least 4 feet. Our landing for these guys are intersecting, so in terms of a design decision, that would be a point at which you need to figure out how to make this work, right? So one thing that you could do is move this out of plane of the other object, or I could move all of this over or something. Right now we're going to pretend like it's working. You would fix this design issue if it were your project. And hopefully you would have thought those things out before. So we've made a complete loop, right? We've started in one volume, which is the one that's 1 foot off the ground and is connected to an exterior. So I'm going to turn on the enclosure so you can see that. So we start here from the outside, step into this volume, and circle around, thinking about how the sun path moves throughout the course of the day. So to complete the kind of technical portion of the assignment, I'm going to duplicate or copy and place these guys, put them on the Boolean union layer, make that my active layer, turn off everything else for now just so I can see what I'm doing. Explode these guys, get rid of the intersecting planes. So there's 2 surfaces in here in the middle that I want to get rid of, and I've got 2 overlapping treads here. Now I should be able to join these back together. That's 2 closed poly surfaces. It's this guy. It doesn't want to keep that either. So I'm going to take these 2 and Boolean union. And it's not wanting to join them all together. I don't really have to join them all together before I subtract them out from the other. It's just kind of nice to think about how they make a complete loop, so I can start to visualize what the spaces are going to look like by kind of navigating into this space, and start thinking a little bit about what it would be like to walk through these rooms, and we'll get more into visualization and rendering later. But anyway, so these are my sacrificial volumes, and as we discussed in the previous exercise, you don't necessarily need to make a separate version of them, but I want to be careful that I don't accidentally delete them in the Boolean difference process, so I'm going to, just for sake of demonstration, I'm going to make them into separate objects before I Boolean difference them out. So I'm going to turn on the Boolean difference layer, type in Boolean difference. The surface I want to keep is first, so click that, hit enter, and then select all of these, hit enter. Boolean difference failed, so I'm going to do them one at a time. So that worked. There's something in here that it doesn't like. Let's try this one more time. Boolean difference failed. There's something about this that it doesn't like. I'm going to use a command called merge all faces so that I get rid of all of those kind of construction lines. Basically turns what had been, I'm going to undo, had been all of these separate pieces because I made this up of a series of different pieces. So merge all faces, see if that solves our problem. It basically simplifies the geometry so that hopefully the computer can read it a little bit more easily. So Boolean difference, select this, and then select our simplified geometry, and that time it worked. So I think it again had to do with this tread that was here. So it didn't like having to difference that out. But we got what we needed, so we will be happy about it for now. So you can see all of the connections that are in between these rooms. And the difference version doesn't have necessarily the stairs in it, only has the ones where there needed to be a stair before. And I've got some extra surfaces here on the Boolean union layer that were left over from the construction of copying everything in place. So I'm just going to select these and get rid of them. Or I can turn off the Boolean union layer. That's what that kind of weird interference pattern was doing. You can see here that I didn't simplify the faces for this, so I'm seeing those kind of construction lines. I can do the whole thing. So merge all faces. And it should just kind of clean up the geometry a bit. And that'll help too when we're using the make2d command. Line here somewhere. Just want as clean a drawing as possible. That's our original stair line. Okay, so we've got stairs that are connecting here. We're missing part of our ramp here because it extends out into the space. So that's one of the reasons that I wanted to keep the connectors on a separate layer. Then we're missing all of these stairs over here, which again we would need to redesign because they are running into the ramp. What I'm going to do for now is explode this, get rid of the ramp because it overlaps with the floor of my space. So my space itself can serve as the landing. Sorry, thinking and typing is not working for me at the moment. I'm going to turn off my Boolean difference. I'm going to make the connectors the active so I can see what I'm doing here. I'm going to delete the landing and the enclosure at the top here. Because I didn't merge these faces, this is divided up into a series of triangles because of the geometry that was used to construct it. So merge all faces. It's telling me they can't be further merged. Let's try join. Oh, because they're not joined. So join them first and then merge all faces. And do the same thing to the other side. One of the reasons I want to do that is because I want to trim off the edges of these. So if I go into the top view with ghosted on, I can use the top of the ramp to be a trim line. So trim, the cutting object is going to be this. I can trim off everything on the outside of it. And I want to turn these to extend lines and apparent intersections onto yes, and that should let me, now I'll trim. If not, I'm going to use the polyline command and use this as a reference. Just drawing a line based off of those points and then copying it over from this point over to this point. And the points I'm referring to are the ends of the ramp that I can see ghosted through the top plane that's too long. So then I can use these lines to project. So trim. These are the cutting objects, enter, and I can just delete the sides of these. Enter. And get rid of these so they're not in my way. And let's see what's happening with these other stairs. I should be able to merge all faces. Join these two together. Actually, I probably will need to Boolean union them. And then merge all faces. Same thing over here. So I get it all into a simplified geometry, and then I'm going to explode it so that I can delete the parts that are making it not accessible. So this face, this back face, and the front face. Same thing over here. Explode. And get rid of this, and the back face. Select these guys, join them back together. So now I've got something that is a is kind of an enclosed shell, which is what I want to see in my model. So here in the Boolean difference, I should be able to see how the stairs are working. Over here where the stairs and the ramps project out into the space, you could think about flipping the kind of solid void relationship of this and having the top of the stair run here and then extend down to the side, so it's not kind of a tube, but it's a solid that's carved down into, so that you don't lose the visual connection of this space. You would need to kind of explode this, remove the side walls, draw a line from here over to the side, and then use your duplicate edge to create a polyline up here, and be able to loft those two together. Then you would merge faces. For now, we're going to assume that what we have is correct. Okay, the last thing that we need to do is create the base. So I'm going to activate the base layer. I'm going to refer to my project notes. So the base is 54 feet by 54 feet. So I'm going to use my rectangle command, or my rectangular plane command, start at 0, 0. I'm going to type in 0, 0, 54 feet, 54 feet. And then I'm going to go through a similar compositional exercise where I think about how my volume wants to be located within that plane. So if I'm thinking about kind of where I access it, that's on this face over here, right? So over here is where it connects to the outside. So I probably want that to have kind of a landing. So I want it to move away from move it away from the edge, and maybe even move it away from this edge as well. Excuse me. I could align it with the back wall of the volume. So endpoint here, and then I've got these kind of, I've got access in, and then I've got cantilever over. Maybe I want to move it to, I want to make sure I'm moving my stairs as well. I want to move it to this corner. So that now my kind of volume that's up high is projecting out. You know, this is abstract space, but you could imagine this is the edge of a cliff and it's kind of projecting out, so you get this amazing view. Regardless, I need to turn this plane into a volume that's 4 feet deep, so extrude surface. I want to extrude it as a solid yes, but this time I want to turn off the delete input. I want to turn it on, I'm sorry, I should say, because I don't want to keep the surface and have a volume. I want just one or the other. I'm going to extrude it -4 feet so that it goes down, and I've got my object. So in the next tutorial we'll talk about how you start to turn this into the drawings that you need for class.